Bad Life Podcast! You're listening to the Bad Life Podcast, your number one guide on how to run a profitable band. Here are your hosts, Pete Stannard and Adam West, the Wizard of Rock! Hello and welcome to the Band Life Podcast, where it is our mission to make you a profitable band, music artist, whatever. I am your host, Pete Stannard. I'm here with the Wizard of Rock himself, my beautiful co-host, Mr. Adam West. How are you on this very fine morning? The weather's not been too bad over my way.
I'm loving it, dude. The sun's out, the garden's booming, and I got music blasting out in the garden, upsetting the neighbours. I love it. What more is there not to like about that?
It doesn't get better than that.
What's
mate,
that? You want me to turn it down? Oh, I turn it up then.
Exactly. Just children screaming in paddling pools while you blast out the death metal. Little announcement for the podcast.
Here we go.
I've set up a Facebook group for our lovely listener to contact us directly on.
We're here for you.
Yes, we are. We're here for both of our YouTube subscribers. We have a Facebook group, so if you have any questions about the industry, about the podcast, about us, or anything, go there. We want to try to build a community around this podcast, so I'm sure... And I need to make you an admin on that, I think, mate.
Sorted.
So that you can...
I love more workload, you know that.
Yeah, you love it. So that's what you're here for.
Give me X.
But yeah, hopefully we'll have a few people subscribing to that, as well as the YouTube channel.
Well, this is the
but that's
thing.
fine. That's fine. Anyway, shall we crack on with this episode? Episode 5. We are really burning through this stuff now, and I like this episode, and I'm a bit excited for this episode, but I'm torn about this episode because this needs a little bit of context, a bit of background. So
Go for it, Blad.
a couple of weeks ago, I put out a post about the Great Escape Festival that's happening here in Brighton. And there were the context of the post was that bands were pulling out. Bands and record companies were pulling out of the festival because the festival is sponsored by Barclays Bank. Now, if you don't know what Barclays Bank is a very large bank here in the UK, and they sponsor a lot of different events, music events, sporting events, like the Premiership is sponsored by Barclays. And one of the issues that people have with Barclays is that they loan money to companies that make weapons.
Oh dear.
Oh. Now,
Oh dear.
I need to be quite fair on this. Barclays say that they are not an investor in these companies, and these companies are not doing anything illegal. They are sanctioned by governments and everything else. So they are the kind of, for want of a better expression, they are legal arms dealers. They're not your illegal arms dealers selling, machine guns out the back of cars. They're government contracted arms dealers.
What? And they've admitted to being that legal arms dealers.
Yeah, the companies, like they deal in arms. They sell bombs and bullets and guns and stuff like that. That's what they do.
Wow.
And that's their business. So they're like Tony Stark, I suppose, Stark Industries, to put it into some kind of fictional context. And Barclays, as a business, will loan them money if they need money to buy materials and stuff like any other sort of business loan.
Okay.
So there's nothing illegal going on.
Right.
But just because something's legal doesn't make it necessarily morally correct. As my dear old mum would say, just because you could do something doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And this is the problem that a lot of bands and artists are having with the Great Escape Festival, and why they've pulled out is because a lot of those companies were selling arms to Israel, which is a very hot topic at the moment.
Indeed.
And so, again, to be clear, all of the information that we have is, as far as I'm aware, is correct at the time of recording. We are now in, where are we? Late May. This probably won't go out till at least mid-June.
21st of May.
21st of May. So the circumstances around this war may be very different when this comes out. But I did see some stuff last night that the ICC, the International Criminal Courts, have put an arrest warrant out for Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of Israel. So potentially, this is coming out as the governments that are backing Israel are going to be on the wrong side of history, potentially. They obviously, the ICC feel that there's some questions to answer about how they are pushing this war forward and how they are treating the people of Palestine. But I don't want to get too political on this, okay? So going back to the Great Escape itself, when I did that post, it didn't do well. The first sort of day or so, it only got about 250 views, something like that.
Right.
As of today, I checked it today, it's got nearly 4,000 views. So obviously, as things have progressed throughout the last few weeks and the actual festival itself, now we're into May, it's kicking off.
So it's the trend in hashtags that probably helped that, have
Yeah, that, and it's on TikTok as well. So people are probably searching around the Great Escape and things like that, and it's obviously popped up. So it's something that's gained some headlines because some bigger acts, when I first did it, was only the small acts involved in the festival itself that were pulling out. But since then, Massive Attack, Idols, and Brian Eno have condemned it. Jarvis Cocker has pulled out because he was a keynote speech on there. And Brian Eno's charity called Earth Percent have pulled out from giving their speech as well, as a form of protest against Barclays being a part of this. So to date, 120 bands have pulled out of this festival.
Right, okay.
So it's, and when I first put this post out, there were only like 2 bands that have pulled out. So this story's really gained traction over time. I suppose the other thing to think about is the level at which Barclays sponsor. So they don't just sponsor that; they sponsor the Capital, Summertime Ball, the Great Escape, Download, the Isle of Wight Festival.
Download.
Yeah, Download.
Interesting.
How
many people are gonna boycott that?
Yeah, exactly. I don't see Queens of the Stone Age pulling out anytime soon. But they also partner with Live Nation, the ticket, which is a big thing. And they're a part of Hard Rock Calling, the Wireless Festival, Latitude Festival they sponsor. Yeah, and this is just music events. They also do loads of sporting events and things like that. The sports stuff, I'm not too sure about, because from a moral perspective, the World Cup was in Qatar last time, and I think didn't 10 people die just building the stadium for the Qatar
Oh,
World
you had
Cup.
something like that, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, guys. I'm a little tired today. Been a long week, but
It's been a long old week, but
yeah, you had something like that, yeah.
so I mean, just like Live Nation alone, it produces more than 22,000 concerts for 1,600 artists in 33 countries.
Wow, that's crazy.
The company sold 50 million concert tickets in 2008 alone. So, these aren't small numbers that we're going on about here, and this is quite a big thing. And this is why I'm quite torn about this, because I didn't want to get into the politics. I want to talk about the moral implication.
Well, that's what the show's about, really, isn't it? I suppose it's important for everyone to understand that, because it is a bit of a trigger episode, I imagine. But I'm intrigued to talk about it too.
So if we're coming at this from a moral stance, I suppose the question is: can you occupy the moral high ground about this war and not occupy the moral high ground about anything else? So another example would be the Met Gala recently. There was a big blow up on the Met Gala recently with Hailey Bailey. And actually, I've got the video. Do you want to see the video?
Give it a go.
Give it a go. If I can get to it. Where are we? So the video.
I need my assistant to get me more coffee.
Need you?
More coffee, dear. Thank you.
More coffee. Come on. So here's the video, and I will describe it for our listeners. But those watching on the YouTube can see it.
Let them eat cake.
Here, take the bomb.
That obviously a very short snippet there, but it was basically Hailey Bailey standing in a very ornate dress, very flowery, ornate dress, saying, "Let them eat cake." Now, you got to understand the context of this. So the Met Gala it's a mega rich gala. Okay. One ticket will set you back, guess how much?
The Mac. Oh, John, I'm so out of touch with all this stuff. I imagine it's ridiculously overpriced and only the elitists can afford it. So, I don't know, £500 a ticket?
$75,000 a ticket. But it all goes to charity. Go before you start judging, Mr. West. It all goes to the charity.
Judging? I'm actually in shock more than anything. Say that again, right? So the Met Gala is a very prestigious fashion gala. It raises funds for charity, but the charity is for the benefit of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute in Manhattan. And the tickets cost £75,000.
$1,000. Dollars.
So dollars, sorry, dollars.
Pounds wise, you're just shy of 75,000. So,
It's just ridiculous, man.
A small flat, depending on where you live, you could. It's a good deposit on a house. Yeah.
Do you know what? I'm just going to quickly interject with some of you, and then I'll let you crack on, Peter, right? Because I know you want to go for it. But I think I sent you this video. There's a chap I watched this morning. There's an artist. He must be popular. I'm not sure of him. And what he wants to do, he's talking about the ridiculously priced festivals and events and he wants to put on an event himself where he's offering like almost free tickets to it and a massively reduced cost. It's affordable because music should be available for everybody.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, Young Blood. I think, didn't I send you that video?
Oh, you might have sent it then, did you?
I think I did, yeah.
Then I'm probably catching up with any links of people that, yeah. So I was just like, wow, that's what we want. And then this, I'm like, man, like they've really lost touch. And I suppose that's kind of what we're going to be touching on a bit, isn't it?
Yes, and this is $75,000.
Oh, it's a joke.
A ticket. Now, in again, I need to be fair. Hailey Bailey's defence, she wasn't attending the gala.
Right.
She was there working for Entertainment Tonight. So she was purely there to talk to the people who could afford $75,000 a ticket.
Well, it ain't me or you, is it?
No. Will be the short answer to that. No,
What was it, Lars? You were going to say? Dude. Man.
I think even if I had the money, I wouldn't, because it's not really for me. But the other ironic thing is...
Oh, hang on, Pete. It goes to charity.
It goes to charity.
Don't be
but
so
that
biased.
charity is the actual organisation that organised the event in the first place. So it's like me going, I'm going to do a sponsored run for the charity of Pete Stannard.
And you all give me lots of money because I'm great.
Per sponsorship, there's a minimum requirement of 75 grand.
Oh my God, the world's just messed up, man. Isn't it?
It's crazy.
Sorry, it's fucked up. It really is. Like, come on.
So the reason that this blew up was because Hailey Bailey said, "Let them eat cake," which, if you're a history buff, as I'm not, and I had to look this up.
Yes, you are.
Well, I kind of knew, but I wanted to double check the story, to be honest. Marie Antoinette, just before the French Revolution, she was so out of touch with her people. When people told her that her subjects were starving to death, she said, "Let them eat cake." That's how out of touch she was. And she was let's say she spent all of France's money on herself, and that's why people were starving to death. And that's what triggered the French Revolution, and that's why she had her head chopped off.
Didn't Queen sing a song about them as well, didn't they?
Probably. Yeah. I'd imagine so. They're very
Bohemian Rhapsody, I think. They mentioned Marie Antoinette.
Oh, okay.
Bit of music info for you.
Bit of music, yeah. So, she was guillotined in 1793, just after the French Revolution. And that's literally what I put on the notes. Ouch.
Yeah.
So for context is really important here. If she just said it anywhere else or doing anything, no one would probably think of it. But because she was dressed very elaborately, she was at a very elaborate event. There was also protests just before about the Israel-Palestine thing. And it was a very out of touch comment to post.
Unless she knew what she was saying.
Well, it kind of backfired, though, because there was a blackout. She lost lots of followers. So she's very much an influencer. I think she's got like 10 million followers. She lost droves of followers from that. And she then started to lose things like her work with Entertainment Tonight. She lost a lot of sponsorship stuff. So if it was her intention, she shot herself in the foot, to be honest. But I'm sure she'll be back with a vengeance once all of this has died down, which it probably has already, considering it was like a week ago. So, but that's the joys of the news cycles, I suppose, at the moment. So the reason that I bring this up is that fashion doesn't have the best human rights record, what with child exploitation, sweatshops, and all the rest of it. Nike have had their problems and things like that. And I suppose for us as music artists, where it kind of slots in with us is, well, when we're buying merchandise to sell, do we look at these sorts of things? Is it something that we're kind of thinking about, I suppose? I don't know. Is it something that you think, because you're doing a lot of merch stuff, Adam, yourself recently, where are you sourcing your merch from? And have you done your due diligence to see if where you're buying it from hasn't had, babies' severed fingers running on the seams of the Shallow Souls beanie hats? Well, that sort of thing.
Here's an interesting fact for you, right? So I think most low-key musicians, and certainly the high-end musicians, I think we all, first of all, I think we all try and do a conscious effort and job to make sure that, you know, first thing and foremost, that it's probably locally sourced. It's not harming anybody. I know a lot of bands put some effort into keeping it eco-friendly, so, you know, saving the planet and all that stuff, right? So sometimes, though, it's very, very difficult to find the exact source of where it's made. That said, when it comes to the band merch for the band, we did look at trying to get it locally sourced. So a lot of our items, predominantly the t-shirts, shows it being UK based, right? So we know they're not coming from any sweatshops. Unless there are sweatshops in the UK, which I'm obviously not aware of.
Not that I'm aware of. But
No.
yeah, there is modern slavery here. But I don't, that's a whole other thing. But no, carry on.
yeah,
Sorry.
right.
Didn't mean to interject.
No, that's fine. So one of the concerns most bands have, obviously, is with us, I mentioned it before on the channel, is that I can get t-shirts made from a local supplier that knocks up 100 t-shirts for X amount of money, under 30 pounds or something. And he got his own print shop and he prints them there. There's some downsides doing it that way, because obviously this particular individual cannot do the high quality colors that I've implemented into some of the artwork. So then you've got to go a bit further afield to a bigger industry or a bigger company that's got those. So there's places like Pins and Knuckles, they're the most common one that most bands use. So I'll be intrigued to see. I know they got a big factory where they do it, but I don't know where they source their t-shirts from. So we haven't looked in depth where the t-shirts are sourced, but they do say made using ethically grown and harvested US cotton. I think if most of us could get our t-shirts made by very small independent businesses, then we would. But what you end up doing is that your cost to produce it is very high. I couldn't say off the top of my head. We've done our best to try and get it locally sourced. If you click on the one we've got now, Soft Style, just not to go into it a huge amount, but again, what I read out, it gives you where they're ethically grown, but you know, like obviously location for some of these are US and not the UK. So obviously some of the t-shirts we use, I believe, are UK based, especially if you go into the product itself. So yeah, hope that answers the question. I mean, you know,
It's a fingers
hard.
crossed thing. And yeah, if you do want to buy some Shallow Souls merchandise, then get onto their website. The link tree is below, or it's
Yeah, that's it. Find everything on there.
you can find everything at the Shallow Souls website. And without doing too much of a shameless plug, but Adam is I think you're doing the right thing. You're doing as much as you can, and you've looked at it from a perspective of how can we do this locally and how can we do this ethically, I suppose. But there seems to be so much kind of cloak and dagger about, you know, excusing the pun when talking about clothing, but there seems to be a lot of cloak and dagger about where these things are sourced. Are those UK suppliers a middleman as such? So are they buying the t-shirts from China and then selling it on to you? And all that sort of thing. It becomes a real minefield, I think.
Well, yeah, for most bands, I think if I was to speak for them, which, you know, I'm not, but I think for the most of them, we're just like, look, as long as we can see that the company we're using is saying that they're locally sourced and they're not ill-treating people who are making them, we're comfortable with that. Because, like, you know, a lot of our time, we've got to write music. Like, a lot of people don't have the time to go into it. Because I think you'll probably find that, like you said, maybe they're getting it from China, the teas or whatever, and then they're producing them in a UK factory to print on. Because if it's cheap, you know someone or something is suffering. So like when you buy cheap food, your health is going to suffer. And I think it's the same sort of thing. You know, I don't think there's any way that a band could charge £8 for a t-shirt and actually make more than 10% profit, because that t-shirt would have to be cheap and very nasty probably, because how can you sell something that cheap? Because there's delivery costs, there's production. It's huge. I mean, just getting into the Shopify myself, you know, we've laid it all down, and what I'm trying to do now is fine tune everything. So at least I can go, right, it's all set up now, because they got multiple t-shirts, and it's really just figuring out which is the best and where it comes from. And as time moves on, we'll probably end up closing in the window a bit to go, okay, well, let's use these t-shirts because now I know they're from here and who's making them. But, you know, I think we'd all have a shock if we chose whoever to make these t-shirts, where they're actually coming from. Most bands, if they're really sincere, a bit like what we're talking about now in this title podcast, is that they would all be greatly shocked when it comes to like, oh, you're going to boycott download as well then? Because it's like,
and this is the thing,
it's like, well, there you go. Like you said,
are you going to stop watching the Premiership football?
There you go.
Are you going to hand in your season ticket after you've just spent how many thousands?
I think you'll find that most people are very, very shallow. We all are. That's kind of the premise of the band name,
right,
you know.
Right down to their souls.
Honestly, and like we're all culpable of it. I suppose the thing here is to how invested are you in your morals, right? Because bottom line is like, okay, like you said, if you're gonna boycott, then you really want to get your pencil and your little notepad out and start jotting stuff down.
Yeah. And
over to
really
you, mate. Over to you.
Looking, and this is why I've struggled with it, because as I sit here in this studio and I look around and I look at all the technology that's here, all the equipment they've got, right, analog equipment right the way through to digital stuff. I've got 2 laptops, loads of desktops. We've got a TV.
All made in China.
Oh yeah. I've got obviously mobile phone, but even this amplifier, right? This is hand built in the States, and how were the components mined for this? What was the logistical impact of having this shipped from the States to the UK? What was the environmental impact of that? Going right down, I mean, I looked at Apple alone, right? I've got Apple products and I've got Windows-based product, Microsoft products. Both have this human right problem that Apple have, but Apple openly admit that they have a human rights problem. One of their plants in China, 13 people have committed suicide because they feel that they're being overworked.
No unions, I don't expect.
It's one of those things that, and when
hard.
And that's just the construction of it. So these people are like high up in on the grand scheme of things. When you get into actually the mining of the materials that make the components, things like cobalt, copper, gold, all of these things that go into these technologies. Those people,
slavery isn't dead, is it?
No, but there's also this sort of, I can't run a business without these things, without this technology and without all of that. I couldn't run the business that I've got. I couldn't provide for my family in the way that I can now. And what are we going to do? Are we going to go back to farming? Yeah. And then this is why I struggle with it. It's because
we have lost our way. For sure.
We have to work in this way. We're forced to work in this way, and I suppose that's why you're making this comparison to slavery. But I suppose the difference is that no matter what job that I did, whether it's in music or whether it's just if I was working in a bank or if I was working, in wherever, I'd still need technology. I'd still need all of the bits and bobs that goes of running a business
Yeah.
and ways of making money. If I don't make money, I can't feed my family. So it's
the lesser of two evils, isn't it?
it is, but and then I suppose then do we have levels of morality? I suppose.
Well, one way to look at it is this way, right? A lot of us, if not all of us, are brought up into this matrix system. We spend most of our lives living within it before we understand how it works, who controls it, and then decide what my morals are. Because when most people go, oh, I didn't know, it's like, well, that's not your fault, right? There are powers at play that put all these pieces in place to gather people around, to buy their product, and so on and so forth. It's a matrix system that a lot of us are not aware of, don't have the time to research or look into at a young age. It's not until you probably get to our age that we are now, the ripe old 40s, that you're like, where you start questioning things and sort of probably going, something not right. And then, and I suppose, I don't think it's any of our faults, really. We are where we're here. A lot of this is controlled. So yes, like you want to start your business, well, settle this up, okay. Like, do you know how long it takes just to try and get any information alone? Like, it would take how long would it take to maybe actually find the source of where your t-shirts are coming from? You probably spend a day actually getting into it. Now, then you're going to spend maybe a day or two looking into all the components that come from your product there. And then you got a decision to make. If and for a lot of us that are musicians, our intent, I suppose, is to write meaningful and beautiful music that has an impact on the human soul. Is that a bad thing? I don't think it is. So it can basically signal out the negative side of what got us to be able to do this thing. Now, can we make people aware of it? Sure. Just like what we're talking about with this festival and Barclays and making people aware. But it's like you said, it's very conflicting and torn, because when you actually get into this stuff, a lot of people just go, oh, they shut off instantly. And because they don't want to admit that actually what they're doing and what they've got to give up is the key thing here.
Yeah.
Is like you say, you mentioned download and the ticket sales. I'm like, okay, fine. You want to stand on your moral high ground? Good. Okay. Now, we're going to tell you the other bits and pieces. It's very, very wide and broad. So, okay, now tell me where you stand. When we talk about morals, I think it's really important that you stick to your guns as an individual, because sometimes when you go do your homework and research on ethically sourced clothing, on certain banks that are funding certain things, I think people will be generally very, very surprised of how deep it actually goes. And without getting labelled the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, it's like, no. This is now this public knowledge, and we're talking about some serious effects that has some serious consequences to artists, musicians, venues, and the whole shebang. You've just read off some of the products. You've just read off some of the items that we're talking about in the notes, and it's just like, that's just a small fraction. It's like, my God, it's quite alarming, right? I mean, so you're telling me they've got ties to all those different entities? I'm like,
yeah,
it's a tough one. Where does it stop?
Yeah. And that's just one bank. And not even the biggest bank. Yeah.
The tentacles, mate, of this bigger entity is massive. So it is very conflicting, and it's also important to talk about, I think, because if you're really going to, and this is what gripes me sometimes with these influencers and these people out there, when they're like Marie Antoinette, very out of touch. They're like, well, I'm going to boycott. I'm like, oh, okay, you're going to boycott it, right? Okay, so are you going to boycott the other 4 or 5, which also impact the things you're wearing on your feet? Which, by the way, if I look at them correctly, were made in a sweatshop. So technically, you shouldn't be wearing any clothes. You shouldn't be living in your house. It's like, where does it stop?
Yeah,
And like
and
you,
I think
yeah,
that's kind of the root of this debate is
yeah.
where does that moral thing sit? Yeah, I'm. This is
And
why
is
I'm
it our
really
fault?
struggling.
Yeah, is it our fault? So when somebody
Yeah,
goes, like, okay, do I take off these clothing? Because I've now found out my mate's very into. I suppose he's a bit of an anarchist, and if you look up the word in, it's not what it's used. It's used as a term of abuse. I think a lot of time. I'm an anarchist. So we'll look up the terminology, and you'll find out the true meaning of it.
yeah,
And I suppose he's a bit of a pacifist. And you're like, okay, well, he's made a real moral decision to not wear animal products and not invest in these certain things. But life is very difficult when you need the system to work for you because this is where we live. And
yeah,
so, sometimes you got to go, what can I do? And how much of it actually will eventually get me going, okay, there's nothing else left for me to do. I've got to go live in the bush.
yeah, yeah,
Because, like, you know what I mean?
yeah, and it's one of these things, and I was talking to my wife about this as well, and she actually made a fair point of, yeah, would you condone the mother for stealing baby formula from a supermarket to feed her baby because she can't afford it this month? And that,
Yeah.
what jury would send that mother to prison, or what? Yeah, and
Yeah.
what would the criminal justice system do? Would they give her a fine? Well, that's going to help. Yeah, it's ridiculous when you kind of think once you
We've
start
lost
down that
touch.
road of
I know.
morals, where does it end? I suppose, and this is one of the things that you kind of think, especially when you've got like Massive Attack, right? Probably the biggest artist
Yeah.
that's kind of condoned the Great Escape Festival. It's like, well, you're an electronic dance outfit. Like, how much technology has been used for you to produce your music to put you in the position that you're in now?
Right.
And what was the impact of that from a moral standpoint? How many people died for you to become Massive Attack?
Yeah.
It's one of those things. And as we've touched on sort of gigging, touring, do you want to hear some touring stuff?
Go for it.
Okay, so touring musicians, okay? So greenhouse gas emissions from live music events in venues and festivals in the UK, so this is just the UK, were more than 400,000 tons of CO2 equivalent per year, with around 3/4 of the industry emissions coming from live music performance sector. This equates to nearly 1 billion miles driven by the average petrol-powered passenger vehicle. The high burden of greenhouse gas emissions from touring can be attributed to the transport of large stage setups, instruments, bands, and crews all over the world. Often tours are compacted into concentrated tight timescales. To accommodate this, private jets are frequently used, which on a 500-kilometer trip emit 4.5 to 14 times more CO2 than a commercial airliner. And that's
So, Iron Maiden, give up your plane.
sell the plane, Bruce. Come on, mate.
I
But
honestly,
so they actually have a jumbo jet. Again, it's one of those things. It's just like,
yeah, I know.
if our listeners, I will leave the link to that report for our listeners to peruse.
It's not us saying it.
That's not us saying it.
Okay.
It's the climate news.
Right.
.co.uk.
I think it's really important too, right? With all that said, if I may say, that we have really lost our way in this world, all of us. I think we like, I know a lot of people are making a really conscious effort to try and get back to the roots and the basics, and in terms of music's and moral, I mean, we've really fallen quite a way off the wagon, I think. And when we talk about stuff like this, you know, it's like we're getting further and further to the edge of that plank. Eventually, we're going to all just fall off. Because is it Barclays Bank they're boycotting? Is it? Or no, the actual music?
They're boycotting the Great Escape Festival itself.
So, did the Great Escape Festival actually know the Barclays Bank had ties to all this?
I don't have that information. I couldn't tell you.
And again, you're right, Pete. It is a tough one to digest because morally, was it are music artists moral, immoral, or hypocrites? I think for the most part, we're hypocrites, but unaware of a lot of what we're doing that it becomes hypocritical.
Yeah, and this is the big question. This is of the at the crux of this conversation is I don't think you can be 100% moral.
Here's another one for you quickly, right? It's like beer. The amount of water that is used to produce beer.
Yeah.
Do you produce beer when we have a drought?
Yeah, of course you do.
Like height of summer where everybody likes drinking and having a good time?
It's getting hammered. Yeah, and there'll be a lot of environmentalists who say, well, yeah, but if you're going to choose your battles, even if you get a reasonably sourced piece of clothing, the amount of water that's going to be used into that, I think it's like it was something ridiculous. Like there's tens and tens of liters of water that goes into producing each T-shirt in the world. And it's one of those kind of things that you kind of go, okay. And I think from a personal perspective, I'm kind of coming down on you're going to have to choose what hill you want to die on at the end of the day. And if you're doing what you can, and it's it's not massively ignorant, but you're going to be hypocritical either way, no matter what you do, because if you take a stance on one thing, you can't occupy the moral high ground on something else, because morals are morals at the end of the day. So we're going to be innately immoral regardless.
I know the world is messed up. I think everybody kind of understands that now. If we're making a moral decision to try and somehow improve the lives of other people, help each other out, then if we're doing that in just a small way, that's the best we can do. The thing is, we don't run the show here, do we? We're not running the show. It is, a very small-handed bunch of individuals that are doing it with their own agenda, without morals and consequences, because if they had that, we wouldn't be talking about this right now, would we? So, when, I don't think, we as people or musicians should be blaming ourselves. If there's going to be, a high note to the podcast and, what can we do to make it better, doing something small in improving the quality of people's lives, based on what we're using, electronic or textile wise, then I think that's enough, really, because ultimately it's down to the big entities at the top that filter all this stuff down, that eventually come to us, that really have to make the big impact. I mean, it's okay for artists and musicians to boycott all this. I'm like, well, if you want to open up that can of worms, go ahead, because I'm telling you now, it goes deeper than all of you know. Really, it's. I mean, look, they don't call me the Wizard of Rock for nothing, but
But I suppose to counter the whole thing of you've got the big entities and then you've got the little guys.
Yeah.
The big entities rely on the little people, and I think this is part of the problem. If the little people all bound together, if they get some kind of cohesion between them, they can make a big difference. And I suppose that's where
the problem.
This is coming from with, to have 120 bands pull out, the Great Escape's not a massive festival, not by like, it is considered to be like an industry showcase festival. So from a career perspective, this is quite a big leap for a lot of these small bands that have pulled out, because there are a lot of record labels, management, and they're looking for up and coming acts. And the Great Escape is one of those festivals that they go to try to sort of see who they can sign and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So it is quite a brave thing for these 120 bands to do, and it must have worried the organisers to lose that amount of bands. And I'm wondering if next year Barclays will be sponsoring it, if it forces the event organisers to go, okay, we can't work with Barclays anymore because of that. Because we've lost X amount of ticket sales, because now people aren't going to go because these acts aren't showing up.
So what they should say is go, look, tell you guys, okay, hang on, don't pull out just yet. Let us negotiate and talk now that we know if we didn't know. And so we'll try something else. But here's the thing, right? To run a festival requires a huge amount of money, time and effort.
Bringing it to the art, I mean, there's very few bands. It used to be there was a big thing throughout the 60s and 70s, probably more to do with the Vietnam War than anything else, but there was a lot of protest music around war.
I feel a lot of good bands.
From Sabbath, all the Jimi Hendrix stuff, Bob Dylan and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, his story was quite...
Yeah, historically, like music has always been very anti-war, and there's... Well, I've never heard a pro-war song.
Well, it's interesting you bring it up, because again, you got what we're talking about here and music. There's a lot of bands and artists that. I use another one, Bob Marley, right?
Bob Marley, yeah.
They never wanted war.
No.
So, I think most musicians they don't want any of this, right?
No.
So I suppose on the plus side, it's like boycotting a bank that's got ties to that. Probably a good thing. I think maybe they could have all got together and maybe thought, look, okay, is there another way around this instead of just pulling out? Because you've now only just found that out. So you've impacted now the lives of many, many people, and probably doing more harm by pulling out.
If I was playing it, I would probably try to do some form of protest around it at that gig, and try to get that message out there as much as possible, saying, Barclays, they need to have a better moral stance on where they're investing their money.
Well, I think,
it's it's a very, very contentious subject, and doing something like that, I think, will be have a lot more impact, I think, because the news cycles, they run so quickly now. This will be forgotten. Probably before this actual podcast is aired,
and everybody goes back to their daily lives.
Unless something happens with download or something like that kind of props it back up again, sort of thing. But if all of those bands got together and had a sort of single-minded protest around it, rather than just sort of jumping ship, as it were, I think that would have a lot more impact, because you're going to have that initial thing of going, well, we as a collective band, 120 bands, we're going to do a protest, and you put that out on social media, and you put a press release out saying that we're going to protest this, protest the Great Escape this year because of XYZ.
And they could just say we're not happy about what the information we've found out, but rather than just ruin the whole thing, we'll carry on. But just so you know, we're obviously not happy about this information we've just received. Because I can't imagine anybody on the lower levels would have known that. I didn't know it. I mean, was there a possibility that it's true? Well, that could be said for anything, any entity that has a lot of money. So I think, on the front of it, most like didn't know. I mean, I didn't know it was funded by banks or like actually how many. I don't know how many banks actually fund how many festivals anyway. But if you think about it, right, in order to get these huge scale events up, you need some money from somewhere because the likes of me and you don't have it.
And I
It's
suppose,
expensive.
coming at it from the protester side of
Yeah.
that is that you'd say, well, maybe going into these festivals, you should be proactive on who's involved, who's financing what, and all the rest of it, so that you can make that moral judgment and you can make an informed choice
Yeah.
on whether you're comfortable playing that or not. And without that knowledge, these things get overlooked, and that bank will then get the advertising and everything else, and it can then generate more money that it can then lend to or more arms manufacturers, and then they can finance the war machine that is ultimately killing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in certain areas of the world, in the matter of, was it 300,000 Palestinians have been killed over the last few months?
Man, it makes me sick.
Yeah.
It really does when you hear stuff like this. It's like how long have we been at this for? But I think for me and you, Pete, right, doing what we're doing, I think we're playing our part to do the best we can to try and help other people. I mean, look at the business you run, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your strategy courses, a lot of what you do, you offer for free. I mean, you're not asking for funds and money off people unless there's a part of the business side where you do, which obviously if you're a business, you need to make money, obviously. But I mean, that's good deeds. It's good deed. I mean, okay, so you might have equipment there that's made in a sweatshop, but you're doing a good thing and helping other people because, like you said, you need those things to run your business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose there's, how much collateral can you afford between doing something that's right, I
Yeah.
suppose, and taking on something that's wrong.
Okay, well, let me give you two examples, right, of how
Okay.
I'm doing my bit. Firstly and foremost, see this band here, The Drowning. I've been following them since about 2005, right?
Okay.
Any gig they play, I usually buy a T-shirt. I buy band merch, right? Okay, so put aside where it comes from because I don't know, but I'm supporting a band, okay? And
Yeah.
every week we come on here, we're supporting, with the exception of Pete, he's supporting Metallica or Make Millions. I'm supporting the local guy. I'm sure Pete's got some local band T-shirts. But, it's a big thing for me. Like, I love band merch. I don't know why. I'm obsessively obsessed with it. I go to a gig and I'll be like, oh, merch, I got to buy some. Because the fact
Yeah.
that, like, if you like, the little guy has gone out of his way to invest time and effort into designing and producing something. You can see that happy glow on their face. They're like, oh, if you buy some of my merch, I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter who you are. I'm going to buy a T-shirt or CD because it's seeing the joy in that person's face. And secondly, I haven't been to a festival gig since 1996. I'm doing my bit. There you go. Happy days. Seriously, I wanted to put on events to try and help the little guy. Because not only is it costly to go to these events, like, I'm just like, well, yeah, they have a big impact, don't they, on a lot of things. But for the most part, it's very expensive. And so I done my bit. I've been to a festival since 1996. So there you go. Yay!
Fair enough. And the only festivals that I go to are small local ones, and
That's right, yeah.
I do try to buy the merch from the bands as much as I can. But there's only a certain amount that I can do as an individual. And I do all of my strategy stuff is for free. Right. The only thing I charge for is music production, and that's it. And that's because I want these bands to be successful, whether they work with me or not. Yeah. I hope that they can sort of take that information and apply it to their business or their strategies, I suppose.
Yep.
And gain some traction at least from that. So I don't keep anything at the end of the day. I'm trying to try to be as open about what I know of the industry and what I know around what I do. But do I know everything? No. Will it work
No,
for everyone? No.
exactly.
Yeah.
None of us do. That's the point, you know.
And and I think this is part of the problem with certainly educational stuff, is that you've got these kind of gurus, quote unquote, saying, this is how I get 1 million followers on Instagram. And I'm like, well, do you want 1 million followers on Instagram? That sort of thing.
Well, you do if you're spreading a good deed or a good word, right? And I think that's pretty much what we're trying to do with what we're involved with, right? You and your business.
Yeah.
Well, like, you're doing a good deed trying to help, your fellow man. I mean, that's the starting point. Anything else is mostly out of our control. Like when people go, I'm going to change the world, it's like one person won't change the world. But
No.
the influence of one person onto the next one will tell
Yeah.
somebody else, and off you go. Yeah, well, that's how you started. I think if we're all doing that, then kudos. That's great, yeah? Because nobody likes the way things are at the moment. Let's be honest. Music related, merch related. It's really tough at the moment to live.
Yeah. And that's why I kind of went
And that's not funny like
thought
that. It's
along
just,
the lines of, if those 120 bands played protest shows at that event,
yeah,
that would have a bigger impact than
course,
just kind of
yeah.
going, right? Because
Absolutely.
the news cycle will forget about this. Yeah, like I say, probably before this podcast comes out. But hopefully, this has at least highlighted a few things for our listeners to
Sure.
kind of look at what they're doing, where they're at, whether they're into, they're probably going to be into music, listening to this, but also, I think there's a lot of musicians out there that kind of are very moral driven, but aren't thinking about the much bigger picture of, well, was that guitar that I bought, was the wood, sustainably cut down? The strings that I buy, where does the material come from for those steel strings? The components in that guitar, where do they come from, and all the rest of it. And when you start to think along that sort of lines, your brain starts to go, well, hang on, where does this end up? And
Exactly.
I think you come to a point where you just go, look, you can't think like that.
Well, you can't control it all, can you?
Yeah, you need to do what you do, and you need to survive at the end of the day. And if that means buying an Apple computer, then it means buying an Apple computer at the end of the day.
But you
maybe
use
try
it-
and offset it in some other way.
But you're using the Apple computer, to use that analogy, to help people, right? So isn't that sort of cancelling out the negative?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's using that to offset stuff. And if you're that morally in tune, you're probably that's gonna come through in your music.
Sure.
And if you can create awareness of those moral problems, then that will hopefully move things forward in a positive way. And if you can, like you say, if you can get a collective of people behind you in doing things for the right, the people at the top, they have to listen, because at some point, if everyone goes, I'm not going to buy any more Apple products, Apple have got a big problem.
The stuff is. I think this is a period for a lot of us. Maybe back to this particular episode we're talking about. Maybe it's a turning point. Maybe this needs to happen so we can move on to like a better world then, or a better understanding of what we're doing. I mean, what do you think, Pete?
I think stuff has to get really bad before people take action on stuff like this. So, like if you speak to people about the environment, for example, like global warming and stuff like that, a lot of people go, "What can you do?" And it's like, well, not a lot until your house is under 3 foot of water because it's flooded, because of, the sea's risen X amount, or the local rivers burst its banks, or there's so much wash coming off fields and stuff like that basically animal excrement is flowing through your front room. That's when people start to get really, and it's one of those bizarre things. Like, I think we've covered all the bases.
Damn, boy.
Of this, because I didn't expect this to be a conversation that we could end, because I don't think you can, to be honest. But I think it's a really interesting conversation to have.
I think it's relevant.
Yeah,
little,
very much so.
Without getting too invested in all the issues, because I suppose it's important to say that, well, for me anyway, I'm not. I just want to play and write music and have a decent crowd to play in front of. Anything else of what we've talked about that comes into it, I guess we'll deal with it when we do. But because there's just so much to cover, we'll all end up giving it up, I think, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I think if you're so moral, you wouldn't end up doing anything, because nothing will be right. Yeah. It's
tough, isn't it, man? So when you sent me the notes for this, I was like, man, this is going to be a deep one. I was just like, okay. I was going to message you beforehand, actually, and go, right, are we really doing this? This is a deep one.
Bad Life Podcast!